Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on diversity and neurodiversity. My name is Reesha, and I'll be your chair for this afternoon. So we will have two pre-recorded talks today, and they will be screened back to back. Since they're pre-recorded, there isn't going to be any designated time for questions at the end. However, you can ask questions through the app, and the speaker will pick these up later on. If you have any issues with accessing the app or you have any questions about that, you can go to Lauren, who will identify herself now. She's right here, and she'll be able to help you. And also one thing to remember is to include your name when asking questions so that the speaker can pick this up. Okay, so we're going to start with a talk from Dr. Nick Walker, who is a queer autistic writer, educator, and futurist, as well as a professor of psychology at California Institute of Integral Studies. Her talk will be about expanding the creative potentials of human neurodiversity. And I'll hand it over to play the recording now.
Good morning. Dr. Nick Walker here, coming to you on video. Wish I could be there to see you in person. But hi, hello. Here we are talking about all kinds of minds. So, diversity is a source of creative potential, of potential creative synergy. And when we talk about the benefit of all kinds of minds in the world, that's really what we're talking about, is this potential for creative synergy given any problem for which we need a creative solution, given the task of creating better futures for ourselves, given the task of creativity on scales small, large, global. We benefit from all kinds of minds and their multiple perspectives and their multiple ways of thinking and their multiple modes of perception. And we benefit particularly by bringing these minds together, by the creative synergy between them. That, sure, if you have a given thing that needs solving, a given idea one needs to explore, well, you put a whole lot of different minds working on it, and you get a whole variety of solutions, and that's great. Good to have more options and more perspectives, and you never know which ones will turn out to be helpful. But more to the point, the synergy that when you start putting these different minds together and they have to find ways to work together and share perspectives and communicate perspectives to each other, when they have to find ways to understand one another's perspectives and make their own perspectives clear, well, then these creative synergies emerge. These solutions and ideas begin to emerge that no single mind within the collective might have come up with on its own, but it's in the chemistry between and among different minds that creative synergy appears, that magic happens. Creativity is something that can be multiplied, that can be accelerated by the interaction between different consciousnesses and how different minds with their different perceptions and ways of thinking and approaches, well, chemistry happens among them, and what you get is something that is inevitably greater than the sum of its parts. And of course, the first creative challenge is thus the challenge of how our minds work together. How can we get different kinds of minds working with each other? And that's very exciting to explore. How do you create these contexts? How do we develop common languages and ways of understanding each other and boost our capacity to be open to different ways of thinking? So all of these are crucial to this idea of neurodiversity, and it takes all kinds of minds. Now, the work of the neurodiversity movement has often been focused on accommodation, on sort of where the neurodiversity intersects disability rights, disability advocacy, because one has to accommodate different body minds in order to enable their participation. So regardless of how many different kinds of minds exist, the only ones that we benefit from are the ones where we find ways to actually enable them to participate in the socio-cultural creative processes, to participate in the collective creativity of humanity. And that means accommodation of people's different needs. And so that aspect is crucial and has for a while been central, but it's also crucial that we remember that the real point here is in enabling everyone's participation. I mean, there's this aspect of we just want to care about all humans, bring all humans in, enable all humans participation in society, enable all humans to fulfill their best creative potentials and have good quality of life. We want that for people, of course. We don't want anyone to be disabled and excluded through lack of accommodation. But also, there's the benefit to the collective of humanity as a whole, the benefit to communities and to humanity on every scale, including a global level, that comes from inclusion. There is that greater creative synergy. We all benefit, not only in terms of it's the right and compassionate thing to do to enable everyone's participation in society and to try to meet everyone's needs and give everyone access, but also we all benefit because the more different body minds we can accommodate and welcome and embrace, well, the more creative synergy we are creating to enrich the entire human community in terms of our capacity to collectively create a better world and create better futures for ourselves. So this diversity is crucial. It takes all kinds of minds to move us forward into a better consciously created future. And in that sense, you know, I'm certainly a neurodiversity scholar and a neurodiversity advocate. I'm also a futurist and really shamelessly utopian about the potentials of neurodiversity and the potentials of what I call neurocosmopolitanism, where we take the same cosmopolitan attitude towards neurodiversity as we ideally seek to take towards cultural diversity. This idea, you know, we understand increasingly in this world that there's no normal culture or there's no one right or superior culture, and that everyone benefits from cultural hybridity and the creative interplay of cultural exchange. We all benefit from that, from a broad multiculturalism and an open-minded approach to what we can learn from this cross-cultural chemistry. And the same thing applies to neurodiversity, this neurocosmopolitan spirit of there's no one right or normal way for a human mind to function. there's just this neurodiversity, this wild difference among minds, my wild variation, and so many different ways that humans can perceive and think and communicate and interact with the world and others, so many different ways that consciousness can develop. And in that diversity, when we embrace it and drop ideas of, oh, there's one normal or right way to be, but when we plunge into that diversity and the uncertainty created by that diversity and courageously embrace the uncertainties of it and the ambiguities of how do we work with different minds and minds vastly different from our own, well, that's where the beauty of creative synergy happens. Now, what I want to talk about here also is moving beyond what I call neuro-essentialism. I want to talk about neuro-queering, neurodiversity. And so when I talk about neuro-essentialism, what I mean is that there's been an unfortunate tendency in the neurodiversity movement and in neurodiversity scholarship to limit our sense of what neurodiversity means, to think in terms of, there's neurotypicality, that's like kind of a dominant cognitive majority, and then there's like specific types of neurodivergence. I've seen these charts and illustrations of like, oh, there's this, there's autism, and there's dyslexia, and there's all these different ways to be neurodivergent. And we limit ourselves with that, with this idea that, oh, you're born neurotypical, you have this type of brain, or you're born autistic, or you're born dyslexic, or born with this or that particular neurocognitive variant, or a combination of neurocognitive variants. And this whole idea that there are different neurotypes. Now, it's not necessarily false, and it's potentially useful. It's certainly been extremely useful to me and most other autistic people I know to have this term autistic and to think of ourselves as autistic and build autistic community around that and compare notes and do autistic rights advocacy and such. Yeah, it's got its use. But in terms of looking at, it takes all kinds of minds, in terms of looking at how to maximize the collective human creative potential that's intrinsic in neurodiversity, we limit ourselves when we have this essentialist view of fixed neurotypes, of your brain is neurotypical or autistic or whatever. That's limiting. It's a narrow range. It's not all kinds of minds. It's a whole lot of little specific boxes that people get fitted into, which can overlap and such. And I don't think it's scientifically accurate. People have looked very hard for specific biomarkers to lend scientific credence to the categories we divide people into so often. But the biomarkers aren't really that clear and solid, and it's not like there are these clear absolute distinctions of, oh, you have an autistic brain or you don't. The evidence around what are specific biomarkers that divide us into different types is very vague, and these neurotypes are really socially constructed categories, and they have purpose, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes these categories get in the way. There's no such thing as a normal brain, and there's no such thing as a neurotypical brain. That would be just another word for a normal brain. When I talk about neurotypicality, what I mean is just behaving in accordance with dominant social norms of how a so-called normal person behaves. So behaving in compliance with local standards of neuronormativity. That's what I mean by neurotypicality. It's just a performance, a learned way of acting normal that is instilled in people, and some people are capable of doing that, of putting on that normal act. And as long as they're doing it, we can say, oh yeah, they're neurotypical, they're practicing neurotypicality, they're performing neurotypicality. Some people are just not capable of passing for whatever the local standards of normal are. So we can say certainly they're not neurotypical. But nobody's born neurotypical. Nobody's doomed to spend their lives being neurotypical. It's just a constructed category and a constructed performance. There is no neurotypical brain. There's no inherently, intrinsically neurotypical person. Anybody can be neurodivergent in various ways. You can't make yourself autistic if you're not autistic, for instance, but you can certainly stop performing normalcy and explore the weirder potentials of your brain. And there's so many ways to be neurodivergent and to lean into your neurodivergent potentials, to do what I call neuro-queering, to queer your normativity and bust out of the shell of normativity. There's so many ways to queer your neurocognitive functioning, to make yourself neuroqueer. People do it by doing lots of psychedelics. People do it by meditating a lot. There's all sorts of exciting brain changes that happen in people from the practices they do, from long-term commitment to meditation practices, from doing lots of psychedelics, from various mind-body transformative practices, from even being a dedicated musician for one's whole life, develops different parts of the brain. Urban cab drivers, like London and New York City cab drivers, notoriously, have really interesting brain development things happen as a result of memorizing the streets. All these things we do alter the neural pathways in the brain, and these are all ways of being neurodivergent. There's all these existing methods and practices, transformative or transpersonal practices designed to bring out various potentials of human consciousness, martial arts training, and various exciting forms of yoga and other such transformative spiritual practices, embodiment practices that all alter the consciousness and alter neurocognitive functioning in interesting ways. So everyone's body-mind is customizable. Everyone's neurocognitive functioning is wildly customizable. And that doesn't necessarily fit into any box. We have certain specific labels for these particular, if you fit into these particular patterns of experience and cognition, we can say you're autistic, but it goes way beyond that. The potentials really are infinite. And what I would like to see in terms of the direction of neurodiversity scholarship and neurodiversity creative exploration is more exploration of that, of let's move away from putting people into little boxes and talking about neurotypes, and start looking at, well, what do you want your neurocognitive functioning to be like? What do you want? How do you want to customize your body-mind, whether you're starting out as autistic or dyslexic or none of the above, or whether you're starting out with something like that or not? How do you want to customize it? How do you want to personally explore and cultivate the weird potentials of your mind? And with more people doing that, what we get is not just, all these different minds based on how people are born, the different neurocognitive styles that emerge from accidents of genetics and developmental environment, but also an intentional neurodiversity, an active neuroqueering, where we move beyond this essentialist idea of, oh, you are whatever you're born as, and start looking at, well, what do you want to be? Approach your own neurocognitive functioning as a creative canvas. How do you want to transform yourself? How do you want to customize your neurocognitive style and your potentials, and what practices will get you there? And what happens there is we are expanding the scope of human neurodiversity, not just settling for the enormous creative potential that's already there based on different people being born with different neurocognitive styles and proclivities, but also increasing the amount of human neurodiversity. So not just, oh, there's like neurotypical people and autistic people and all that, but there's like, oh, okay, well, I was born autistic, and then I did this and this and this and this to alter my consciousness and expand my mind and develop these particular potentials. And now my brain is weird in a wholly different, unique way. And, you know, this person was born not autistic, and they did all these interesting things to become weirder in how their mind worked, to explore unique potentials that appealed to them. And now they're weird in this whole unique way. And it's not about you're just limited to what you're born with. Nobody's doomed to spend their lives being neurotypical, because everybody has these wildly weird cognitive potentials they can lean into and cultivate and develop. And so this is where I think the next frontier of neurodiversity is, and the next frontier of human creative potential is really saying, as an individual, how do I want to cultivate my mind? Now I have this mind, and maybe it started out neurodivergent in some way, or maybe it didn't. But what do I want to do with it that's unique? How do I want to shape my consciousness? And what do I want to contribute to the human creative collective process, to our collective creativity and our collective field of neurodiversity? Expand the field of neurodiversity, let go of narrow categories, and start looking at just how many different kinds of wildly different minds we can create. So that's my message for you all today, and happy neuroqueering. Please enjoy your brain.
Fascinating talk there by Dr. Nick Walker, really pushing the boundaries of what we think we know about what neurodiversity even is. Super interesting. Next, we will hear from Kassiane Asasumasu. Kassiane is multiply neurodivergent, a biracial Asian American, and a longtime autistic activist. Her talk focuses on neurodivergent intersectionalities. Over to the tech team to play the recording.
Hello, and welcome to Neurodivergent Intersectionalities. My name is Kassiane Asasumasu, and I am vintage 1982 autistic and a board member of Foundations for Divergent Minds. You may also know my blog that I've neglected for a few years, or some of my essays that are in books, or my Twitter, or something of mine, or you may not, I don't know. So welcome to my presentation. I tried real hard to get my slides to work with the video on my computer, but I couldn't figure it out. I am not the kind of autistic person who's good at computers. I'm the kind of autistic person who rolls dice and pretends to be an elf for hours at a time. So Yeah, I'm also the kind of autistic person that thinks I'm funny, so I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not. Please laugh. Or don't, I'm not there, so I can't tell that you don't think I'm funny. So today we are talking about neurodivergent intersectionalities, and it's a lot of material in a very little time. So I actually had to narrow my scope like a whole bunch, which has then led to like 30 takes. So you are getting the authentic, I've done this 30 times and don't remember what I've said this time experience. So hi, I'm thrilled. I am genuinely thrilled to be getting this right this time. So first, some definitions. Neurodivergent is not neurotypical, basically, and that's defining a positive with a negative, and I kind of hate it, but really, it really is just, you're not neurotypical. Your brain, or you're anywhere else in your nervous system, because your nervous system's like this whole deal, right? It's not just what's here, it's your whole deal, is in some way not the way that a medical textbook writes up a nervous system, because the medical model can get in the bin, but their textbooks are, I guess, pretty good at telling you what they are norming on, so we're going to go with that. People always ask me if insert thing here is neurodivergent, and the answer is probably yes. Epilepsy is neurodivergent, ADD, autism, various psychiatric disabilities. It's all there. So now we've cleared that up. And then there's, so that's neurodivergent. Intersectionalities. Intersectionality is a term first used by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a Black author, and it was initially to discuss the intersection of being Black and being a woman, and how so you've got your racism and you've got your sexism, and then they come together, and right here where they connect is this whole extra kind of oppression, right? That's the intersection. Your intersectionality is, what's happening there. That's its own specific theory and conversation, and I'm not going to get real deep into the theory weeds here because that's going to be unfun for all of us, but it's a really important concept that, you've got your oppressions and your privileges, and what happens where they crash into each other is fundamentally a bit different than what happens if you've just got one or the other thing going on. It just is. It's like when you shade with two different colored pencils. If you have red here and yellow here, over here you've got red, over here you've got yellow. When you put them together, you don't have red, yellow, you have orange. So there's our definitions. And one more definition that's related to that, and it's really important to understand also what we're talking about, and is more importantly where a lot of people are coming from and why it's important to understand intersectionality. The different slot, which is something that I heard of before I heard of the word intersectionality, and that I heard the word from Mel Baggs back in 2014. The different slot is the reason that you go to the doctor and you're like, oh, well, I have, I have a headache, or I've got headaches that won't stop. And they're like, oh, well, that's not common with, Ehlers-Danlos. So like, well, first, yes, it is. Second, okay, I can still have a headache. The different slot is the idea that you can have one thing going on with you that is different from the so-called norm. Our so-called norm in the society in which I live, because I know we're not all from the society in which I live, is a neurotypical, able-bodied, cis, het, Christian, white man who's approximately middle class. That's our norm, and that's the norm a lot of people are going off of, and you're allowed to be different from that in like one way without people's minds kind of short-circuiting about it. So if you need things related to more than one thing, or even if you don't like jokes because, wow, that's kind of oppressive and gross about more than one thing, they're like, what, isn't that dramatic? And it's like, no, it's really, really not, actually. So that's the different slot, the opposite of intersectionality in a way, the idea that you can only have one thing going on. And it's a really important concept to understand, I think, that a lot of people are looking at people with, you can be different in one way. But in reality, you know, we're mixing all of our colored pencils over here. So those are some things to keep in mind. Our intersections, which are, you know, how all our colored pencils go together, are gonna affect a few things. First and foremost, they're gonna affect how I experience me. And yeah, I am going to do a lot of first personing right now because we don't have a lot of time, and I don't want to leave any of the people who I love who would be great to have as examples out. And there's, you know, the asking permission thing. But the way that I experience my neurodivergences is different from how it would be if I was, you know, if I was white, if I was rich, if I was cishet, if I was, honestly, if I had, now to go the other, if I was less physically abled, because physically I am pretty abled. So I do experience my own neurodivergences different from the way people at other intersections experience theirs. You know, we all learn at home, for example, different things. And I'm going to talk about race here right now, because a lot of the most obvious things, I think, are going to be how we're acculturated in our homes. I learned real early that the way that I actually don't like to make eye contact at all is perfectly fine, and, you know, it's respectful in some settings. So I never, you know, I actually learned that not making eye contact is just fine, and that pushing it is very specifically a thing for some people and not other people. So like how I experience that particular part of my neurodivergence is like, oh, okay, so yes, eye contact hurts, but it's nowhere near the pressure thing that somebody else might experience, right? Or another example that is, again, it's very what you are raised with. Where are my same food friends at? I'm asking that like you can see me and like I can see you, and I cannot, but we're going to pretend. Okay. Where are my chicken nugget and fries friends at? I'm sure I have some. We're going to pretend I have some. Or at least some of you have heard that, you know, autistic people like chicky and fries. I am not a chicky and fries autistic person. I am a spicy food autistic person. Specifically, I am a tom kha autistic person, or a pineapple fried rice autistic person. That's not that spicy, but it's many flavors. Because to me, you know, the food that tastes like comfort is the food that has a lot of layers. And that is a very, very much thing that you learn, right? The food that tastes like safety is food that you were raised with when you're little. It's you know, things like inborn or very early, you know, food things notwithstanding. But there's lots of autistic people of color who are like, oh, give me the spicy food or give me the multi-flavored food, right? That's, you know, just one of many examples of how I'm experiencing those intersections. I'm experiencing my neurodivergence differently because I've got different colored pencils going on over here than maybe you do. And then the things I was taught, those are the good things I was taught. I will die on the hill that being taught that Tom Kha feels like safety and delicious is a good thing. But then there's the things I was taught that are not so good, like that I don't get to be, even more so than all neurodivergent kids are not so much accommodated. Even though I had identification, right? I was identified really young. Many autistic kids of color are taught to quit being bad or to quit being dramatic, or, you don't have that going on, just quit. I was taught that I was a drama queen, so that's a good time. And you know what? I have it good in some ways. I'm not going to say real good, but there are kids who are much more racialized than I am and who are read much more differently than I was, who are taught at home that they need to, mask much better than I ever had to for their own safety. Like, that is a thing you learn at home, that you need to mask better for your own safety because your parents want you to make it to the next day. And again, I'm in the United States. You want to make it to the next day, you're going to learn that, right? That is a thing that you have to teach your kid. And it sucks, is a thing. So those are some of the ways that we experience our neurodivergence differently because of because of our intersections. Then, of course, there's how you experience me, or how, we experience each other. I get it. So again, we're going to do quite a bit of first person to start. For some reason, people really want to call me quirky, and I am sure it's because I have like anime protagonist vibes, which bothers me on multiple levels. But that is entirely because of how people read me. A lot of neurodivergent people read as women get, oh, you're quirky. Like, no, I am very much not. I'm a disaster who has high energy. There's different things. Other autistic people and otherwise neurodivergent people will get a lot of people deciding to read them as angry. And yes, I'm saying deciding to read them as. That's intentional because I feel like everybody, including other neurodivergent people, can make the choice to sit down and say, are they actually angry, or am I making this choice because society has taught me to read people with certain characteristics as angry? Because there's a lot of society teaching you to read that people certain ways. We all are indoctrinated by our surroundings, and we can choose to be better, but that means we have to choose to be better, right? You're also going to experience your neighbors, your neuro siblings, who have learned to code switch perhaps a little bit differently. And here's another definition for you. Code switching is how your friends who are neighbors and, I don't know, maybe people you don't particularly like, who are multicultural, we can go to school and speak and use our school manners, our white American Midwestern manners. And then I can go home to my grandmother, my Japanese grandmother, and use my grandma manners. Or how my black friends, they can go home and use their AAVE in the United States, and there's that whole very rich culture. Using two cultures, that is code switching, and it is amazing, and it is a skill. So you're reading people differently. Our intersections, like I said, we're experiencing us differently. You're experiencing us differently. It's a whole pile of experiences. And then, so those two things, how you're experiencing us, how we're experiencing us, it plays out in the wider world and in our communities, like in some really interesting ways that I wish I had more than 4 minutes to go into, but I am sorry, out of luck. Because we should know this, right? So now I'm telling you so that we'll know this. It plays out in really head-desky ways sometimes, head to the desk. Like even in places where we should know better. Because we forget, it's so embarrassing. We'll be in neurodivergent only groups. And somebody will say something that's like, oh, so clueless. Like, oh, sweetie, why would you say that? Why? Something really microaggressive. Just the kind of thing that somebody says that's thoughtlessly bigoted that you hear all the time, and it's like, excuse me. And then somebody calls them on it, and then they say, oh, but it's ableist to hold me accountable for that. It's so mean, and it's like, and I can't help being racist, I'm autistic, and it's like, everybody here in this autistic-only group is autistic. Please do not. There's just a lot of very clueless things that people do of that nature that I really, really need people to stop doing. Oh, that is my 3-minute warning. So, yeah, that is a thing that I need you to not just global you. We all need to be aware that it's not a different slot. The different slot is a lie. If you have just one thing and it is neurodivergence, okay, that's real cool. But if you are in a place where everybody is neurodivergent, most of them probably are not just neurodivergent, just because math, right? Excuse me. I love math, that doesn't mean I'm great at it, but most of the people around you aren't gonna have just the one thing. And we need to really look kindly at not leave, no minds left behind does in fact mean let's make our spaces more welcoming for the people who maybe haven't been that welcomed because of stuff like that, and ignoring like, oh, that was actually real racist, or oh, that was actually real homophobic, can we maybe not? Like, no, you are not too impulsive to not say that. You are not too autistic to not say that. Can we please just take a deep breath and say, oh, I won't say that again. Nobody's going to be mad at you, I promise. If you apologize and don't say that again. Learning is so good for us. Please have a cat. So, yeah, that's some neurodivergent intersectionalities. We are all the impressionist colored pencils of intersectionality, not the different slot. This is Tater. He is a cat, and he is neurodivergent. He has cerebellar hypoplasia. And we actually made it through. We made it through I don't know, this was a very long take. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, I will respond to them on the app when it's not 5 in the morning my time.
A really insightful talk by Kassiane there about things we need to all think about when considering intersectionality with neurodivergence, and also great guest appearance by Tater at the end there. So that brings us to the end of this pre-recorded session. So as I mentioned earlier, there isn't any time for questions right now since the authors are in a different time zone. So you're very welcome to send questions through the app. Make sure you include your name so that the authors can respond to you. And that's it. I hope you really enjoyed the session, and thank you so much for coming.